There is a smell that comes with hospitals. Not the antiseptic, not the floor wax, but something underneath all of that. Something that smells like waiting. I know that smell well. I sat in it for 11 days when my husband was dying, and I sat in it again last March when my son called to tell me what he had decided to do with my house. He did not call it that, of course. He called it a family decision. He said the word family the way people say it when they mean themselves. I am 68 years old. I worked as a licensed practical nurse for 31 years at Mercy Regional in Columbus, Ohio. I raised 2 children, mostly on my own, after my husband Reggie passed from a stroke in 2009. I paid off our house on Clover Hill Road in 2017. A 3-bedroom with a screened porch and a silver maple in the front yard that Reggie planted when our son was born. That house is mine. The deed is in my name alone. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest. My son's name is Theo. He is 41 years old. He works in commercial real estate in Atlanta. He married a woman named Iris 4 years ago, and I say this with as much honesty as I can manage. I tried with her. I brought food when they moved into their condo. I showed up when she asked me to. I watched how she looked at Reggie's photograph on their mantel the one time I visited, like it was a piece of furniture she was deciding whether to keep. I told myself I was imagining things. Last November, Theo called to say they wanted to throw me a birthday party. My 68th, he said Iris had been planning it for weeks, that they wanted to do something special, that family needed to come together more. I was touched. I told my neighbor Ruth about it. I bought a new blouse, grey with small pearl buttons, because Ruth said it brought out my eyes. The party was at a rented event space in Buckhead. Theo paid for everything, the catering, the flowers, white roses in tall glass vases, a small jazz trio in the corner. My sister flew in from Memphis. My oldest friend, a woman I have known since the 3rd grade, drove 4 hours from Cincinnati. There were maybe 40 people in that room, and I stood at the entrance feeling something I had almost forgotten, the particular warmth of being celebrated. Iris looked beautiful. She always does. She hugged me at the door and said, "You look wonderful, Mum," and I believed her. That was the last moment of the evening I believed anything without examining it first. Dinner was served around 7. The food was good. Brisket, roasted vegetables, a sweet potato dish that Theo told me Iris had made herself. We ate, and people gave small toasts. My sister told the story about the time I drove through a snowstorm to bring her chicken soup when she had pneumonia. Theo stood up and talked about how I worked double shifts so he could go to the debate camp he wanted in the 8th grade. I cried a little. He cried a little. Iris watched all of it with a small smile and both hands folded in her lap. After dessert, Theo asked everyone to give us a moment. I thought he was going to give a toast. He sat down beside me and put his hand over mine, and I remember noticing that his palm was dry. Nervous people have wet palms. His were dry, which told me he had been rehearsing this. He said he had been thinking a lot about the future. He said he wanted to make sure I was taken care of. He said the house on Clover Hill was a wonderful asset, but that it was sitting idle, his word, idle, and that there were some options worth considering. Then Iris came around to my other side and set a folder on the table in front of me. I looked at the folder. I looked at my son. The jazz trio was still playing somewhere behind me. Someone laughed at another table. The folder had a tab on it. The tab said Estate Planning, Mom. I opened it. Inside was a quitclaim deed, already filled out. My name is grantor. Theo and Iris is grantees. The property address, 4412 Clover Hill Road, Columbus, Ohio, 432-142. I sat with that for a moment. The paper was crisp and white, and the ink was very dark. Someone had pressed hard when they filled it out. I said, "What is this?" Theo said it was just a formality. He said it would simplify things down the road. He said that if anything happened to me, the house would go through probate, and probate could take years and cost money, and this was just a cleaner way to handle it. He said he had already talked to an attorney. I said, "You talked to an attorney about my house without telling me." He said he was trying to protect me. I closed the folder. I set it back on the table. The pearl buttons on my blouse caught the light from the chandelier above us, and for a strange second I focused on that. Just the small glint of light. Just that. Because I needed one moment that was not this. I said, "I am not signing anything tonight." Iris said, "Mum, it's really just a formality." She said Mum the same way she said it at the door. Easy. Practiced. I had heard nurses use that same tone with patients who needed to be managed. I said I understood what they were telling me and that I wanted to think about it and that tonight was my birthday and I would like to enjoy the rest of it. I folded my hands in my lap the same way Iris had folded hers during the toasts, and I watched something shift in her face. Theo said, "Of course, Mum, take all the time you need." He picked up the folder. They moved back to their seats. The jazz trio played. My sister, who had seen the whole thing from across the room, came and sat beside me and did not say a word, just took my hand, and that was the kindest thing anyone did for me that entire night. My friend from Cincinnati found me by the coat rack at the end of the evening. She had overheard more than I realized. She squeezed both my arms and looked at me directly and said, "You know what that was, don't you?" I said, "Yes, I know what that was." I flew home to Columbus the next morning. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and looked out at the silver maple, which was bare in March, just the grey branches against a grey sky. Reggie planted that tree the spring after Theo was born. He dug the hole himself on a Saturday morning while Theo slept in a carrier on my chest. I remembered the weight of my son against my sternum. I remembered how I thought, standing in the yard watching my husband dig, that this is what permanence feels like. I thought about the quitclaim deed. A quitclaim transfers whatever ownership you have with no warranties, no protections. It is one of the simplest ways to move real property. I knew this because after Reggie died, I had spent 6 months educating myself about exactly this kind of thing. I had sat at the same table with a legal dictionary and a yellow notepad, and I had learned what I needed to learn, because I was alone and the house was the only thing standing between me and nothing. Theo knew I knew this. He had watched me do it. That was the part I kept returning to on the flight home and at the kitchen table, and in the weeks that followed. My son had watched me teach myself property law after his father died, and he had still put that folder in front of me at my birthday party and called it a formality. I did not call him right away. I needed to think without his voice in my ear. I called my doctor's office on a Monday and asked if they knew an elder law attorney they could recommend. They gave me a name, a woman in Worthington who specialized in exactly this. I made an appointment. Her name was Gloria Mercer. She was small and precise, and she wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She read the description of the quitclaim situation in about 90 seconds, and then she looked at me over her glasses and said, "I'm glad you didn't sign." I said, "Tell me what I should do." She told me. We spent an hour and a half in her office and I took notes, and when I left, I had a clear plan and a follow-up appointment for 2 weeks later. I want to be honest about what happened in me during this time, because I think it matters. I was not angry in the way people expect when they hear a story like this. Anger came later. What I felt first was grief, a specific, quiet grief, for the version of my son I thought I knew. I had given Theo everything I had, not perfectly, not without mistakes, but everything. And somewhere between the debate camp and the Atlanta condo and the woman with the pearl-handled smile, he had decided that everything was not enough. Or maybe he had decided that I was not sharp enough to notice. I was not sure which was worse. I thought about my mother. She had died with nothing because she trusted the wrong people with what little she had. A cousin who borrowed money and moved away, a landlord who kept a security deposit she was owed, small losses that accumulated into a life with no cushion. I had spent 31 years ensuring I would not end the same way. I was not about to hand that over in a rented event space in Buckhead because my son had dry palms and a rehearsed speech. Theo called 11 days after the party. He left a voicemail, warm, casual, as if nothing had happened. He asked how I was feeling. He said Iris sent her love. He said he was just checking in. I called him back that evening. He answered on the second ring and immediately said, "Mom, I've been thinking, and I really do think we should talk about the house situation more." I said, "I've been thinking about it too." He said, "That's great. I really think once we sit down and—" I said, "I met with an attorney, Theo." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Oh." I said, "I've placed the property into a revocable living trust. My name is the trustee. I am the sole beneficiary during my lifetime. I've named your aunt as the successor trustee. The house will pass outside of probate when I'm gone, which is what you said you were worried about. The probate concern is handled." It was quiet again, longer this time. I said, "Is there something else you wanted to talk about?" He said, "Mom, I wasn't trying to—" I said, "I know what you were trying to do. I'm not angry with you tonight. But I need you to understand something. That house is mine. Your father and I built that life together, and when he left, I held on to it alone. It is not an asset. It is not idle. It is the place where I'm going to live for the rest of my time, and when I'm gone, I will decide what happens to it, not before." He said my name. I said, "I love you. That does not change. But this conversation is finished." I set the phone down on the kitchen table. Outside the window, the maple was still bare. A cardinal had landed in the upper branches, a red flash against the grey, and I watched it for a moment before it flew away. I want to tell you what happened with Theo and Iris, because I know you are wondering. We did not stop speaking. I am not someone who cuts and walks forever. That is not who I am, and I do not believe it would have served me. But something changed, and I think we both felt it. The easy warmth that used to exist between my son and me, the kind where you call just to call, where you laugh at old memories without thinking about it. That warmth became something more careful, more deliberate. I grieve that too. Iris and I have never addressed it directly. When we are all together at holidays, she is pleasant, and I am pleasant, and we are two people being pleasant at each other, which is its own kind of sadness. There is a woman I know from church, Odessa, who is in her late 70s. Last summer, she told me she signed her house over to her daughter years ago, and now she pays rent in what used to be her own home. She told me this the way people tell you something they cannot undo, not looking for advice, just needing someone to hear it. I held her hand and I did not say much. There was nothing to say, but I thought about that folder on the table at the birthday party, the dark ink, the crisp white paper, the jazz trio playing behind me. I thought about how easy it would have been to sign. I have worked with people in their final years long enough to know that loss comes in many forms. You lose your health sometimes. You lose people you love. But there is another kind of loss that does not get talked about enough. The loss of control over your own life. The slow erosion of your authority over your own choices. It happens to women especially. People begin to treat your boundaries like suggestions. They soften their voices and widen their eyes, and say we're just trying to help, and they mean it sometimes. And sometimes they don't. I am not a suspicious woman by nature. I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt. I raised my children to be honest, and I treated my patients the same way I would want to be treated, and I have tried my whole life to think well of people until they showed me otherwise. My son showed me otherwise. I'm still trying to think well of him. That is the work now. What I know is this. I will not apologize for protecting what belongs to me. I will not pretend the birthday party was something it was not. I will not smile pleasantly and act as though the folder on the table was just a misunderstanding, a small awkwardness, a thing we should move past without naming it. It happened. I am allowed to say it happened. The silver maple is starting to bud now. I can see it from the kitchen window in the mornings when I drink my coffee. The new leaves come in red before they turn green. Most people do not know that about silver maples, that they start red. Reggie knew. He loved that tree in every season. This house is mine. The trust is filed. The deed is protected. And when I walk out onto that screen porch in the evenings and listen to the neighborhood settle into quiet, I feel something I had almost given up, expecting to feel again. I feel at peace in my own home. That is what I refuse to let them take. The cardinal came back to the maple this morning. I noticed it while my coffee was still hot, which means I was up early, which means I did not sleep as well as I pretend to. I think about what happened, not with bitterness, not anymore, but the way you think about a bone that healed crooked. It is there. You feel it when the weather changes. You have learned to live around it. What I know now, sitting at this table in the house that is still mine, is that what Theo did had consequences, not because the universe punishes the dishonest, but because actions have weight, real, practical, measurable weight. He put a quitclaim deed in front of his mother at her own birthday party, a document already filled out, already planned, carried into that room in a folder with my name on the tab. That was not a mistake, that was a choice. And choices shape what comes next, not through fate, not through punishment handed down from somewhere above, but through the simple logic of cause and effect. He showed me who he was willing to become. I showed him who I had always been. Those two things do not resolve easily. I think about the version of myself who might have signed. She was there briefly at that table, the part of me that loved my son so completely that I almost mistook his confidence for my confusion. I had seen that happen to women I knew. Good women, intelligent women, women who had worked and saved and built something real, and who signed it away because someone they loved spoke with certainty, and they had been taught, somewhere along the way, to trust certainty over their own judgment. I did not sign because I had done the work of knowing. After Reggie died, I sat at that same kitchen table and I read. I asked questions. I talked to people who understood things I did not yet understand. That kind of preparation, the unglamorous, quiet, private kind, is what protected me. Not luck, not instinct alone, the willingness to learn what I needed to learn before I needed it. That is something I would tell any woman in her 60s or her 50s or her 40s, learn the thing now. Learn it before someone puts a folder in front of you. And then there is the harder part, the part that took me longer. I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be after, not just legally protected, not just financially intact, but what kind of person. The easy thing would have been fury. A clean, righteous fury that I carried into every phone call, every holiday, every quiet moment. I had reason for it. No one would have blamed me, but fury is expensive, and I have already spent too much of my life paying for things that were not my fault. What I chose instead was honesty. I told my son the truth plainly, without cruelty, without performing forgiveness I did not yet feel. I named what happened. I protected what was mine. And then I kept living in this house, drinking coffee at this table, watching the maple come back red every spring before it turns green. That is the work, I think, not winning, not even healing exactly, just the daily decision to remain yourself, clear-eyed, upright, still standing in the life you built and refused to give away. The cardinal just flew off. The maple is full of light this morning. I am still here.